Welcome to Musicians versus the World, the podcast where we explore aspects of music and musician life that may not have been covered in music school. I am your host, Christine Smith, and today is our part 2 of our two-part series with composer and musician Alexander Parsons. We'll be talking about the possibilities of spatial audio and Alexander's work with The Room Is Not Silent Collective and their upcoming project From the Fields. As a refresher, our guest today is multi-instrumentalist and composer Alexander Parsons. He is passionate about the intersection of music and technology, and the fusion of classical training, DJ culture, and software-based sound design has become a hallmark of his work. Beyond film and TV, Alexander performs both as a touring musician and session player. He was the founding member of the Miro Shot Collective, pioneering multi-sensory live shows that blend VR, mixed reality, and live orchestration at venues like the Institute of Modern Art in Amsterdam, BAFTA Piccadilly, Somerset House, and South by Southwest. He is currently leading a collective of artists, musicians, and filmmakers called The Room Is Not Silent, whose upcoming installation is entitled From the Fields. And with that refresher, now let's go back to our conversation. But now, the technology has grown so much, and I was learning about this. You have even VR that you've got. You're still doing these immersive experiences. Like, tell me some more about these new projects that you're working on, these collectives.
Yeah, so the VR is this kind of really fascinating project, which is spearheaded by a really, really close friend of mine called Roman Rapak, and he started a studio essentially called Wristband with Anne McKinnon, and the two of them have created this live virtual concert experience, and it blends sort of mixed reality with virtual reality, and it's just a really wonderful experience. The idea is that you're watching a live concert in virtual reality, but then at times you will see the performers. And Roman contacted me many years ago and said, "Look, Alex, come and be part of this." And so I was able to go out to South by Southwest with him this year, and we had sort of my violins alongside this this live virtual reality show, and it's a wonderful way of being transported into this kind of mad kind of other world, but without losing touch of people and the space around you. You can see the performers, you can see your friends, and I love that sort of communal
Okay.
experience.
So if someone were like an audience member or like the person doing this, what are they doing? Do they put on a virtual reality headset and then they can hear you but still see? Does it take them to a different place? What does it look like or feel like or sound like to them?
It's really interesting. It's something that Roman says. It's always really difficult to describe.
Right. I'm trying to picture it in my head.
Yeah, very difficult to describe it. You've got to feel it, and you've got to be there. Which is why it tours so much, which is brilliant.
Wow.
So there is an opportunity to see it. But if we were to sort of describe it as best as possible, you're essentially in an audience of anything from a few people up to 100 people, and you're watching and experiencing a live concert. So you have this live music, but while you're in virtual reality, you are watching. You're taken to different places, and you're not seeing the concert, but you're hearing it in spatial audio, which we could talk about a little bit later as well. So you hear it in spatial audio, but then at points Roman is able to just flip and turn on the augmented reality, and then you can watch the performers. You can watch Roman singing, you can watch my violin playing, and it becomes this real experience again. You're seeing the real world.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That sounds incredible. So every audience member has their own. I guess, would it be glasses or a headset for virtual reality?
A virtual reality headset. So it's essentially what is available at the moment.
That's amazing. Wow. Okay, so describe this spatial audio that you were talking about.
Yeah, so I think another part of the experience, and this was something else that we took out to South by Southwest, is the idea of
Hmm.
having audio that is more than stereo. And so we're used to
Mm,
the idea of, I guess, when you put onto headphones, is the perfect thing. You have a right and a left. And
right.
with spatial audio, you could have up to, well, as many speakers as you want, above, below you, all the way around you. And the fascinating thing about that is that wherever you stand in a room, and I had this experience very recently, actually. I was sort of directed to stand in different parts of a studio and listen to the different instruments that were playing. And I think what's fascinating is, if you're in a stereo environment, you'll hear, if you walk away from a trombone, for example, you might hear a trombone playing. If you walk to a different part of the room, the trombone would sound much quieter. It would sound like it's, much further away, and you wouldn't hear it quite as clearly as the sounds that are closer
Gotcha.
to you.
Hmm.
Same
Hmm.
as if you're at a gig and you're watching a band and you're near the left speaker, you tend to hear those things a little bit more.
Right.
But the fascinating thing about spatial audio, which I guess fascinates me even more than the idea of sounds whizzing around, which it can do very well, um,
Hmm.
is the idea that, wherever you stand in a room, you're able to hear the instruments really clearly, but they just sound different. And so
Okay.
the mix is changing, but the sound of it, it's, yeah, I guess it feels much more, you're very much more aware of all of the instruments playing rather than some being much more prominent than others.
Gotcha.
It's really fascinating. There's,
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
no, I was going to say there's a studio which I was very kindly invited to by a lovely man called Wayne Powell, who's the artist relations at D&B Audio. And they have a lab inside the Science Museum in London, which is set up with 64 speakers, I think it's 64, and they surround you, above you, below you. And so he was guiding me around this room and sort of explaining how it works. And this was in view of a project that we're currently working on as well.
Hmm.
And it was just fascinating to hear the difference between mono and stereo, for example, and to
Hmm.
hear what spatial audio can do beyond the sort of nifty tricks that
Right.
that's sort of the more obvious, wow, we can
Hmm.
get sounds that whirl around us. It's brilliant to hear, how different it is.
Hmm. Like maybe like the timbres change, or you notice a texture that you don't notice if you go off to the left a few feet, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the idea that you can, yeah, experience music in a different way rather than in a way that is better or worse.
Mm.
I think
Okay.
that's what fascinates it. And I think the way Wayne is brilliant at describing and, yeah, just telling you what to listen to, what to listen out for. That kind
Mhm.
of really opened my mind.
Yeah. It turns, I mean, it just shows a different job of music because, if you're in a documentary, your music is storytelling and helping with that emotion that you're talking about, but it can also be art, almost like a painting or almost like an experience. It's a completely different reason to have music in that sense, in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned story, and I think every piece of music has a story. I've always thought that the idea of music at its heart is a storytelling device, whether it's
Hmm.
whether it's a song which has lyrics that tell the story, or whether it's a film score which um is all about communicating the story, or it could be this a story that you're not necessarily seeing, a little bit like in Flight 149. You kind of you see something very different to what you're experiencing musically.
Hmm.
And at the heart, that's that story, in every sense. And I think having the different types of medium, whether it be a film score, whether it be listening in mono, listening in stereo, or spatial audio, it helps tell stories. And I think that's the important thing here. And when I first experienced spatial audio in a proper studio that was built in a way that is uninterrupted, it just made me think, wow, imagine how this could heighten specific types of stories, for those experiencing it.
Well, it kind of shows, I mean, and a lot of music's being mixed into Atmos now, which is kind of a smaller scale of that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and a lot of musicians are starting to experiment with that and seeing all of the different things and how it can add to the expression of what they're doing. So yeah,
Yeah,
I love that.
absolutely. Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. Me too. I think it's brilliant when you hear something that sort of changes things. That's
Uh-huh.
if it sort of changes things or awakes an emotion that you haven't had before, and it could be, but I think as long as like for me, as long as the technology isn't leading the way, as long as the story is leading the way, you can have the most amazing Atmos mix by the most amazing mixer, but if the song doesn't cut it, or if it's you know if I don't know, if the song doesn't cut it, then or if it's telling the wrong story or not telling a story at all, then it's not going to carry. So it's got to be, it's like when you see when you watch something that looks visually amazing and you're wowed for a moment, and then you realize that actually, yeah, it's the story isn't quite carrying it. You
Yeah,
see,
you're not a fan of gimmicks, it seems.
yeah, I think so. It's kind of using technology as something that will heighten something rather than lead it. That's what I love.
Yes. I hear you. I hear you on that. Yep. Can you tell me about this collective, The Room Is Not Silent, and the From the Fields project you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the reason I ended up at this lab in the Science Museum in this kind of
Mhm,
wonderful place was, after speaking with Wayne about
mhm,
this project that I'd sort of quite coincidentally started. I grew up in southeast London,
mhm,
and I've never moved. I, you know, even university was, half an hour away from where I lived, and I always have lived in this very, pretty much the same area. And over the years, places change. New buildings pop up, new shops.
mhm,
Things disappear, and yeah, we always kind of look back on sort of old memories, I guess. You're like, oh, I remember that record shop that used to be there, but it's not there anymore. Um, and so that's always really fascinated me. And particularly, in London, it's a constantly changing
mm,
city.
mhm,
And, and all cities are, but, having grown up in this place, I just witness it every day and see something new every day that I'd never seen before. And I had this opportunity to visit an underground venue that a friend of mine was running and opening. So it was in sort of construction, I guess, and it was underneath Denmark Street in London, which is what we call our Tin Pan Alley. It's got such a rich musical history. The history goes back years, but I guess it started as a music publishing street. So you had a couple of very famous music publishers based there. But, in the sort of 50s and 60s, you had the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Sex Pistols in the 70s. They all kind of recorded there. And
mm,
I was being shown around this venue, and they pointed over there, that's where Rolling Stones record this. And over here is where this happened. I thought, God, this is fascinating. And it's all these sort of stories of the past that are very central or very focused on a very specific place. And
mhm,
that really fascinated me. But then, speaking to him afterwards, he said, well, actually, no, the history of this place, which is in the area in London called St. Giles, it's sandwiched in between much more well-known places. You've got Soho on one side and you've got Covent Garden to the other, so really famous. But actually this little place called St Giles, he said that the history of this place goes back to, the 12th century, and apparently it was in, I guess, built originally as a leper hospital, which was a mile away from the city of London. It was deemed safe enough that that's exactly a mile is where it needs to be, and they had a hospital there, and that's where they kept people who had contracted leprosy, and it was called St Giles in the Fields. And
Oh,
I
okay.
sort of dug into the history of this a little bit because it really fascinated me. It's like, can you imagine London as like a rural fields and pastures that just go
Right.
on endlessly? It was there before Soho or anything like that. So it was just this kind
Amazing.
of very small thing. And so I dug a little deeper and, found out that actually it's quite a dark history. It's where the great
Sounds like it.
plague, yeah, I know, yeah, sort of leper hospital, and it's where the Great Plague started in,
Oh.
1665, I think, if my history is correct. Yes, I think it is. Um,
Um,
then, in the Victorian era, it was one of the worst slums in London, and because of apparently, if you dig down about a foot or not much further, you'll start hitting dead bodies, and it's very bleak.
oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, so it's quite a dark history. But then, of course, you got the sort of musical history as well, and all of this has. I just found it so fascinating, and I've always kind of found spaces interesting. The idea of
Uh-huh.
being somewhere. And I live in quite an old house myself, and I always think, oh, I wonder who lived here before. And
Mhm.
so I did a bit of digging, and it's that same sort of fascination here. So, I mean, I decided that actually, how could we tell the story of this somehow? Um,
Yeah.
well, initially it was musically, but then I thought, well, actually, could it be more than that? It's how could we actually make people create these memories, and how could we actually make people feel something more? And so that this is at the point where I met Wayne at D&B, and he said, well, look, let me introduce you to spatial audio. And yeah, that sort of took a little bit of a roller coaster, because I then thought, well, I'm trying to tell a story here, but if we're using audio, perhaps we need to bring in some of the actual history of this place. Maybe it shouldn't just be about music. Maybe it should be about all sorts of art forms. And I ended up, bumping into a really good friend and director of mine called Ben Anthony, and he he's known for um, brilliant films. And one was about the 7/7 bombings in London, and he won a BAFTA for that. And
Wow.
another film about Grenfell as well,
Mm.
which was an important film in London's history. So both prominent historical events in
Mhm.
London. And we were having a chat, and I thought, well, Ben, why not include some interviews, or of people who've it could be sort of archive based interviews, it could be interviewing people who live there now. How could we incorporate that? So Ben became part of the collective, and then I met another friend, James Wilkie, who's a brilliant sound designer and
Mhm.
also a Max genius, and that's Max MSP. So he builds these interesting patches, and so he's working on ways of collecting sounds in the area and enabling it to change as you move through the space. So
Wow.
as you're entering the venue, you're hearing one thing, but then if you move to a different part of the venue, you might be introduced to something new, and it would all be inspired by this history, which we've entitled from the fields. So the idea
Mhm.
is it's from St Giles in the Fields to the present. And so walking through this space, you will experience sounds, also photography, artwork. There's a brilliant local photographer called Stella McGarvey, who lives very close to me, or has a studio close to me in Peckham in southeast London. And she does this brilliant work in which she burns like ghostly images on top of empty spaces. And it's sort of, to me, when I first saw her work, it was a private show that she was putting on in Peckham. It just jumped out at me because it just felt like it was saying exactly what we were looking for with this project. So there will be projections, and her work will be involved, and there will be music as well. Some of it improvised, which is by myself and my sort of frequent cellist collaborator, Joe Zeitlin. And I'll be writing a piece as well. So it's all these different art forms somehow molded together into an experience. But then you'll be able to experience it spatially as well.
Yeah. So I wonder, musically, are you going to try and do some historical music into there to match the time periods, or is it going to be more of an evocative, sort of experimental, emotional thing?
Well, it's very much led by the story. So I think for me, it's always going to be led more by that than the time periods. I think there may be, and there will be, some elements of the time in there, but I never like to mention things literally. I always kind of, I don't know, I think that's maybe a taste thing. But I always find I'm always drawn towards things that tell a story without necessarily giving you the answer. And that's how this music will lead you. So it will be very much inspired by the place, but I think more so by the people involved. And that's where it's becomes a lot trickier when you're delving into kind of very old history.
Right.
'Cause it can be a bit sketchy looking at, for stories, like how do you find some of them? And there are lots of archives, and frankly, I'm very inexperienced in looking through archives, which is why it's so brilliant to have a historian involved in the project as well. So we have Jane Palmgold, who's our sort of resident historian. She's lived in St Giles for 30 years, and she's been through these archives, and she has these sort of fascinating stories that she's discovered. So it's like, for me, that's where the interest lies. It's more like who lived there, who were the people in this area, not what did the music sound like.
Gotcha.
I mean, if we were to be really literal, I mean, St Giles in the Victorian era was a slum. It didn't have a very good sewerage system, so it probably didn't
I've
smell
heard,
very
yeah.
nice. So if we were going to make it dead on, it probably wouldn't be a great experience.
Probably not.
So we're going to be clever. We're going to, we're not going to be literal. We're going to be evocative.
Evocative, I love that. Yes,
Yeah.
that
That's the aim.
sounds good. Yeah, probably for everybody's other senses, that'll be
Yeah, I think everyone
That's
would thank us.
amazing. Yeah, that's wonderful, and, just speaking on the history part of it, you said there was a hospital there, so
Yeah.
they must have had somewhat good records, right? And if they started building parishes and things, the historian probably has a lot to comb through.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of it's hidden, and I think it's in sort of it's in very it's sort of so it's divided up by Camden Council and another council
Okay.
in London, and so
Mhm.
finding the bits is sort of a little bit more complex, which is where her sort of experience really shines through for us.
Gotcha.
But there are some fascinating records. I think hospital as well. A hospital in the 1200s. It's important to remember isn't
Yeah, probably
maybe what
not
we would
great
imagine as
records.
it's not what we would imagine a hospital to be. More of a an almshouse, somewhere that is somewhere to a respite,
Mhm.
somewhere to get respite.
Mhm. Gotcha, but they may not have death records or birth records like a church would or something like that.
Yeah, but they do exist. some do exist, and obviously the later you get, there's lots of, particularly in the Victorian era, as it really started to develop, huge housing boom in that area. It was actually, if we're going to go deep into history, in that area, it was really sort of 1700s. And Denmark Street, if for any of your listeners who have ever been to Denmark Street, and if they haven't, they really should, because it's a brilliant example of 17th century Georgian townhouses, and almost untouched. They have been, you can see where they've been sort of repaired, but if you actually walk around the back, it's actually very modernized. It's important to remember as well that this part of London it's where Google is, and that's the sort of Google building and Universal, so it is incredibly built up and urban. It's not sort of historic. You wouldn't walk in and go, oh, this is quaint. It's glass and colourful.
Well, yeah, it's London, so
exactly. And then you have Denmark Street, which just has retained its look. But if you sort of wander in, there's a few little sort of passages in behind it that you can walk down and look at from the back, and you'll get glimpses of the old original windows, which is still there. And yeah, I love that.
So what is your role going to be? So you've kind of orchestrated this whole thing, but musically, you're going to be recording some of it and improvising some of it, but you're also you're going to be composing some? Are you going to be working with the mixer? Like how involved are you with all of this?
Well, it's very much a case of, everyone has their own role in this, and the sound designer, so James, will control the sound, and my role in it eventually will be to to compose the piece. So I've composed a suite which is based on stories from the history, and certain chosen stories that we found throughout the history. So composer, but I'll also be performing along with Joe, and Joe Zeitlin, cellist, who I mentioned earlier. We are performing an improvised, I would call it a piece, but it's an improvised piece that is inspired by the area, and we sort of listen to each other, but it's all very sort of electronics focused as well, and that's an opportunity as well to use the D&B system and to really experiment with that system as well. And it's a sort of different way, but it's all going to be very much inspired by stories in terms of tone. So
that's
performer,
amazing.
composer, and in some ways it's coming up with ideas for it, and I guess in some ways managing it as well. Though it is a very collaborative process. I think that's the beauty of working with other artists, is you're able to collaborate, and it becomes everyone's project rather than something that is a passion project for myself. Which, although it's that's not the aim. It's a collaborative project.
And when will this be open so that we can come see it?
It will be this year. So we're
This
aiming
year,
to
like later,
aiming to do it this year.
This year.
And really be towards the end of the year, really. Just that's the
Oh,
time.
that's so exciting. I'm like, congratulations on putting this all together. It sounds like a massive undertaking, but a rewarding one.
Yeah, very much so. I think it's, when something's really enjoyable, and it just sort of comes together. The ideas really lead the way, and I think with something like this, it's brilliant to do this alongside film work, which tells a story in one way. And particularly, I work in a lot of documentary films, and with something like this, it's a way of really being able to follow a narrative, in the same way that you would if a feature film or a TV drama. It's it's the same. It's storytelling, and that's that's what From the Fields is. It's telling a story, but there isn't a picture a picture there, but it is that same idea of telling a story, and that does really kind of lead you. So yes, big undertaking, but it is, wonderful how just when something works, it just happens, which is
Oh, I
lovely.
love it. I love it. It sounds so exciting, and I'm so excited for you, and I can't wait to hear how it all turns out. So, like, really, congratulations on that.
Thanks very
So
much.
Alexander, this has been amazing talking with you. You've opened up my eyes to a lot of different aspects of music that I haven't really spent too much time thinking about, but now I'm gonna research a lot into it, so I'm very excited. But as we finish up, what advice do you have for other aspiring musicians and artists?
That's yeah, it's something I'm asked a lot by aspiring musicians is,
Mhm.
what advice could you give me? And I love that question because it's a question, and I think that's the most important thing for me. I always think it's important to, to always be learning. I think that's a really big thing. Ask about, your craft. If you want to learn how to, yeah, if you want to learn how to become a film composer, then, find someone who's done it before, and, ask them as many questions as you like. Don't feel ashamed about asking those questions, because, we love to share. And, I think that's a really important thing, and it could be something technical, it could be something to do with story. um you know I think just ask those questions. It's the best way to learn. It could be, how do I compose music for a film? That feels like such a broad thing, but that can start a
Right.
conversation that everyone loves to be part of. So yeah,
Mhm.
my advice would be, ask questions, be very curious, and yeah, don't be afraid to do that.
Great. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for being here, Alex. This is Alexander. It has been such a joy talking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, thanks ever so much for your time as well. I really enjoyed it.